Okay, there we go. All right, sorry.
Yay. Okay. Good deal.
Very good.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
And Sally, did you get your volume question answered? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm working on it right now.
Okay.
Sally, look at your keyboard.
Oh.
At your keyboard, and there's a little symbols for the sound.
Well, then let me put my glasses on. That might help.
It might, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This seeing and hearing stuff.
At the top, on the top right of your keyboard, there's symbols for the sound.
Okay.
And on my keyboard, F12 is the loudest, or that's where you get the loudest.
Okay, you're right. There it is.
All right.
Is that working?
I don't know.
All right, y'all, I'm going to sign out on my Chromebook and sign back in on my phone because I think that all of us on the internet here at St. David's, we're pulling it down. So I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm going to use my data instead.
Oops, phone.
I guess we should all, except for Bill and I, should put our phone, put on mute, except for Bill and me.
Yeah, we should mute ourselves.
Yeah, everybody mute except Bill and me.
Just to let people know, down at the bottom, there's a chat button. If you'd like to insert type in a question or something like, a comment like I can't hear you guys or something, we'll be reading those also.
All right, as soon as Galen gets back on, we'll start, but I'm happy to see.
If everybody is on mute, how are they going to ask questions?
Well, they'll unmute themselves when they do that.
Okay.
I'm just referring to Gracia's phone just rang. So if she'd been on mute, we wouldn't have known she had a phone call. Okay, there's Galen. So
also
Steve's
if
there.
you're working on a PC instead of a phone, you don't have to keep going down to the mute button. You can just hold the space bar down and treat it like talkie key. As long as you're holding it down, you are unmuted. As soon as you let go.
Oh, very good.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Not a bit. All right. Well, shall we get started? Do you think it's 5 after, 4 after? Now it's 5 after. We try to be on time at St. David's, usually. So anyway, I'm glad that everybody's here. And I think I'm glad that somebody had the suggestion to do this. And we'll learn some more from each other, I hope. And we'll just indoctrinate Galen. She'll just be so full of St. David's when we finish this, she won't know what to do. I will say that I've asked, Margot is going to co-facilitate the next time, and then Jody the 3rd week. And for the 4th week, we have a real treat. I've spoken with Reverend Elizabeth Cannon, and she's going to be with us the last time as we do chapter 2. I don't know anybody in the diocese more well-versed on Celtic spirituality than she is. She's led many pilgrims to Celtic sites in the British Isles, and I think she's spoken at St. David's before. She's preached and she's spoken on Celtic spirituality too. Not in a long time, so I think that'll be a real treat. So I think this is whatever we want to make it. I guess my idea was be sort of a free-for-all to begin with, and maybe we can take it chapters at the time, but also if you have an idea from another chapter and we're not there yet, please speak it, because we're not formal at all. We'll just start with the prologue. I'm going to tilt my screen down. If you can see this necklace I'm wearing is, I can get it up closer, the representation of the dove and the cross piece on the portico of the church. When we did our 100th anniversary, we had these made and people bought them and have enjoyed wearing them ever since. I guess the main thing I wanted to say about the prologue was that those of you, many of you who are on this were there, and not everybody, of course, that the anticipation that we felt that day was just palatable because we had been without a priest for a long time, a regular priest. And we were just all so excited that we were getting our very own permanent person and who would be with us and lead us off all in wonderful new directions and reinforce the old ones as well. And so it was truly a glorious day. A lot of the Davies and Cox offspring were there, and we had, of course, a great service and then a wonderful dinner. St. David's always has wonderful dinners. Galen, you haven't gotten to experience that yet, but you will in time. And what else? Did anything come up to anybody in reading the prologue especially that you want to mention? I wrote down a couple of things, and this is, I'm sort of a Lynn Hotelling disciple. Many of you remember Lynn when she was at the Silver Herald, and she was so adamant about this. Tuckasegee River is spelled Tuckaseigee, the river. That's in all the old documents and everywhere in the past. Except, of course, the DOT misspelled it when they put up the sign on the new bridge on Old 107 in Cullowhee, Old Cullowhee. Doesn't have the I. So anyway, just in case anybody noticed that, I thought I'd bring it up. The river is spelled with an I, and the post office is spelled with 2 E's. So that's, of course, where I get my mail. So I'm used to that. I don't know when it got, when it got changed over the time, but somewhere it did along the way. Yeah.
You said muted. June?
Yes.
This is Paul. I have a question. Is there anything in the Davies family documents that addresses why he chose to leave and come to this country? And did he maintain contact with family that remained in Wales?
The best that I can tell, I mean, there's no statement really. I'd have to go back and reread his autobiography, which is available and you can read that. I think my understanding was, Paul, that it was just, he was an ambitious and for his time educated man who wanted to do more than work in a mine his whole life. And so he had good references. And so when he left Wales, he had already established, had a position with this Gray company in Philadelphia, and then set about working for them, locating minerals. And he could do that based on his experience there in Wales. As far as keeping in touch with his family, he did have a few letters. I'm not remembering. I don't think he ever returned to Wales. But he did keep in touch with his family. And he says in his autobiography, though, the worst day of his life, or the worst thing that ever happened to him, was when he left his mother and didn't think he would ever see her again.
Yeah.
May I say, Paul, also that if you remember, he had a really good friend, Daniel Phillips, in Wales. They studied together and worked together, and they both left Wales at the same time on the same ship and came to the US. So he also had it wasn't as if he was going to the US just by himself. He had a really good friend.
Right.
And my question to June is, did you ever run across anything that once they got to the US and Daniel Davies went to Pittsburgh, is there any more about his friend, Mr. Phillips?
I never found out any more about him. No, I don't know. But
I'm not seeing it right now, but I'm thinking that I read in here that he worked for a little while after he got to this country, helping with tunnels for the railroad. And one that was mentioned was there's a tunnel just out of Chattanooga, tunnel road, or railroad tunnel. And I'm thinking that he worked on that. But
is that in Murray County, Georgia?
Yeah.
Not
That's on
sure.
page 15.
What's the page?
15. Bottom.
Yeah, down to the bottom paragraph where it talks about Tunnel Hill, and where it talks about, right past that, Ross's Landing. That was the original name of Chattanooga, was Ross's Landing. It was named for the Cherokee chief, John Ross.
right.
And
when I was writing this, I tried to contact that. There's a museum in Murray, Georgia, about the railroad, and I tried to contact them, but I was never able to. I emailed, no response. I phoned, no response, just to see if they had anything on Davies from there, but I was unsuccessful with that one. And then, of course, the other mining he did. And he really discovered the first coal in 12 miles south of Chattanooga on Running Water Creek. And he had a financial interest in that discovery and actually sold his interest because he didn't want to stay there. He wanted to move on. He had come through Jackson County on his way south into Georgia and had just fallen in love with the area. And also he felt the copper, the possibilities for copper mining were really big here, which never did really pan out, not to his expectations. But he had, of course, many other interests besides the mining. He just was that he was a leader. He was just a visionary and a leader, and he rose to the top when he got here, so to speak. And he was in banking and other commercial ventures.
Does anybody else have any more questions about the prologue?
I was just wondering, when you guys all traveled to Wales, were any of his family members, I guess descendants of his family, in Wales that you know of, that you visited or anything? Or did you try to look up any?
None of the trips that we took, that was never part of any of those.
I would have to check, find out with Michael if he I don't think he did. Even the 3 months that he stayed there, I don't believe that he did. I mean, it would, of course, it was a long time.
Yeah.
A long time ago, well over 100 years. So could be hard, but anyway.
Any
Shall-
questions about, any other questions about the prologue?
Can't think of any off the top right now, Bill.
Pardon?
I said I can't think of any more off the
Oh.
top right now.
What about chapter 1?
I'd like to know what the white lilies are that grow along the creek. Does anybody know what the white lilies are?
Adamasca lilies.
How do you spell it, please? Terrible speller.
Help. Margot, Antamasco, I think. And apparently in the mid and late 1800s and early 1900s, they were just everywhere.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's, Cullowhee was known as the Valley of the Lilies.
I'll bet somebody at the History Museum on campus might be able to tell you.
And
I have a question about the pages 17 and 19, 23. The photographs, there's the wonderful 22-room home, and then the view from Forest Hills looking over to St. David's. And I'm assuming that their home, Forest Hill, was right about there and looking across what would have been the Ramsey Center now over to St. David's. Is that correct?
yeah, well, it was up on a hill, on the hill. I think at probably the highest point. I've been up there trying to even find the original site when I was writing this, and I was never able to. The home eventually became a fraternity.
Hmm.
And I contacted the Silva Herald and other sources, and I never could get exactly. I was told that it burned to the ground.
It did, yes.
Yeah, but not, I never could find any other, like a newspaper article or the exact date of when that happened.
Was there not still a house up there when we came?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, oh yes. And it was a fraternity, Kappa
Right.
Alpha fraternity.
Well, the courthouse would have a record of the deed and the progression of ownership from the original deed down to the present.
Sure, it would, right. I didn't do that, Paul. I didn't go that far with it, but anyway, and just to answer Gracia's question, I think whoever took that picture was probably, it's where the person was, that the house was further up the hill than that vantage point. But isn't that a wonderful picture that we have that?
Yes, an amazing photograph.
And
Beautiful home.
I have that framed. I got a copy of it, and it's framed. I think it's in the room now that the therapists use or did before COVID.
My next question has to do with R. Hamilton Brown, who helped put some money up to get the property for the church,
Right.
for the construction of the church. I'm assuming that's the father of the late Frank Brown that we knew in the 70s.
That's right, Frank Brown Sr. Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. And it was John Slater got that, looked that up for me and translated the value into the current currency. So it was $100 in 1883 was a lot of money,
Yeah.
Can any of the newer people picture what this valley looked like? When we first came here, even, it was wide open. There was a swamp that was kind of, where Cullowhee Creek ran through the valley. And I remember our kids, when they were in nursery school, were taken to collect tadpoles there.
Yes.
And now
You
And now
know,
we have
it
this
was
wonderful
it was an airstrip.
stadium and yeah, why they ever wanted to land planes there, I don't know. But anyway, that was an airstrip too.
It was an airstrip. A former member, Catherine Brown, used to fly a plane in and out from that little area just where the Ramsey Center is, and down below it, like where John and Gracia walk every morning now at 6 o'clock. That was an airstrip.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Right.
Well, I have to comment on the thing that struck me most about the first chapter was the fact that Reverend Buell and Bishop Lyman were really they really were taken in by Davies. Davies must have been a real persuader, because, I mean, there's no Episcopalians to speak of in Western North Carolina, and yet he convinces these two guys not only to start building a church, laying a cornerstone, but, you know, the Davies are really about the only Episcopalians around. I mean, the Coxes haven't even showed up yet.
Not yet.
And to do that, it's just amazing to me. They called it the missionary diocese of Western North Carolina. Certainly, that was a missionary effort. And the second thing is, not only aren't there very many Episcopalians, there isn't a clergy there isn't enough clergy when they do have a church, and yet the bishop and Buell start that, and I just it's a tremendous undertaking to me. A great, you talk about risk taking and starting. It's just amazing. And the other thing that occurs to me is that Davies must have been a big supporter of the diocese. He was obviously a man of means. He owned 2,000 acres in Cullowhee, and
well, he was in his 60s.
Also been a supporter. What?
He was in his 60s by then.
Yeah,
I believe, wasn't he? So this must have been a project for his, you know, the later part of his life that he was determined that was going to come to fruition.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And, you know, Bill, his house, of course, was so big. I mean, think of it. There was no Airbnb in Cullowhee in the 1880s, and there was no Comfort Inn. There were no hotels. And so anybody of note who came through here traveling always stayed at the Davies house, because it was big and they were generous. And of course, the bishop always stayed there the 3 times he came to look. I think of all those people there in that early part, the one I most would have liked to meet was Dr. Buell. He was something. Before he came to North Carolina, he was in Maryland, and actually was part of the Underground Railroad. He hid escaped slaves in his area on the Underground Railroad. I searched the country over, hoping to find a day book of his that would show his travels out here from Asheville. Mm-hmm. And I went back, because after his wife died, he moved back to Maryland. I contacted the church there. They didn't have anything. I actually went to the National Archives of the Episcopal Church to see if by chance they would have any kind of a diary or day book that he had, but I couldn't find it. So I just had to go with what was in the proceedings of the convention, which was a great reading, actually, and it grieves me that they don't not even print it anymore, but maybe sometime.
When we get to talking about the church building itself, I'd love to hear more about Alicia's project on the St. David's in the Valley.
All right. When she was doing her work, her architecture school, she wrote a paper. She wrote a paper, and it was printed in a little spiral bound book. And I have a copy of it. And so I use that in the index, her description of the church itself. Carol Payton had emailed me earlier about this, wanting to know about the bricks. Were they made on site? And all I can say is I'm sure they were. I didn't read that written down anywhere, but I did read that Davies and the bishop really had thought about a wooden frame church. And but the builder then wanted to do the bricks. And so I feel sure they were just done right there, right on site, made. Because where would they have brought them from? Maybe maybe there was a brickyard and somewhere else in the county, but most likely they were made on site.
I am thankful that it is brick. It certainly has made it sturdy. Lasts the time.
Well, first St. John's Church, and I think the first Grace in the Mountains were wooden, and they're no longer here.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you ever go to Grace in the Mountains, they have a little display, and it has a drawing of their first church, and it looks very similar to St. David's because the builder of St. David's built the first church, the first Grace Church as well.
Jan, does the church have a copy of that paper you're talking about in the church library or resources upstairs?
Which paper, Paul?
The Alicia's paper on architecture.
I don't know. Hold on a minute.
No, I don't think so.
That would be a good thing to have.
Yeah, I'll check with Alicia and see if she has a copy bound like I was able to access, and we could put it there. And she goes into great detail of describing, and I thought, well, she had already done it so beautifully. Why should I redo that? So I just put her paper. I had to change a few words because of the way it was. Things that had changed since she wrote it, but anyway, it's very, very well done.
So June, the core walls are unfired brick in the current church?
Yes.
The soft burned brick.
Yeah.
It says they're soft burned brick.
Soft burned
Not
brick.
hard fired.
Right.
They were probably fired not at a high temperature.
Say it again, Paul.
Probably fired.
Tom.
They were. I suspect they were fired, but they were soft burns. Suggest they were not fired at a high temperature. And when I drive masonry nails into them as part of controlling squirrels, they certainly were soft brick.
But they still held up when you drove a nail into it.
I couldn't get them to take a nail.
You couldn't get them to take a nail.
Take a nail because of how hard they were. Okay, yeah.
Of how soft they were.
Of how soft they were, right.
Well, that's very interesting.
I mean, there were people like us, they were resourceful in what was at hand.
Yeah, people use the materials at hand.
Yeah.
I always think it's when the weather's been damp and you look at the wall behind the altar, you can sort of see the outline of what appears to be layers of brick. And I think they must absorb moisture.
Yes, I bet so.
Well, the church was stuccoed from the beginning, right? The brick.
As far as I don't know, Gracia. I'm guessing that it was, but
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, from the beginning. one thing nobody's mentioned is Davy's interest in education, and I think that's important for us to take note of because it's still an issue that's with us, with the university still being right across the street from us. And he did, when he went to off to work in the mines, he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and studied for 2 hours before he went to work at 6. And then he studied 2 more hours at night. And of course, then when he came to the U.S., I mean, the Episcopal Church itself was very interested in education, with our schools in Raleigh, for example, the St. Mary's, and were always in lots of places. The church provided either space for schooling for children in the community, or actually maybe teachers if there was a priest who would sometimes be the teacher. That happened over in Macon County, for example, with Reverend Deal.
A new question. One of your unpublished sources is Leaves on the Family Tree by Catherine Elizabeth Cox, and I believe that's the daughter of Cora Kate and Thomas.
That's correct.
And then on some of her descendants, probably. Where did you get that, and do we have a copy of that at church?
The book, let me look here. Yeah, the book is at the church, and the way I obtained a copy of it is Davy's Cox granddaughter. Right. Now, Davy's Cox granddaughter.
Catherine
who lived, no, this is a different woman. Her name's not in the book, actually, I don't believe. She lived in Newport, Tennessee, and she came to the
Okay.
Eleanor Penny.
Eleanor Penny, right. She came to the anniversary, the 100th anniversary, and the installation of Michael Hudson. And I chatted with her, and Margot and I especially sort of befriended her. And she mentioned that she had this. Later, I found out that Tyler Blethen and Curtis Wood had borrowed this book when they wrote the history of the university, their book they published on the history of Western. But anyway, she invited me, and I kept in contact with her, and eventually went to visit her at her home in Newport, outside of Newport, Tennessee. And she pulled the book out, and she said that would I like to borrow it? And this was in the early 90s, when I first was going to write a history of St. David's. And I told her, yes, I would like to borrow it. And I did. And I brought it home with me. And she and her friend, I had a friend there who drove her, and they came over several times to worship with us. And she passed away, and I ended up with the book. She had no children. And this book, of course, there were other copies of it. I know the other members of the family had a copy, so it wasn't the only one. But I ended up with her copy, which really I think I should donate to the special collections at Western, and rather than keeping it at the church. But
we can also make a copy for the church.
Yeah, we can. And of course, they have already copied Nancy Tuttrip's scrapbook. They have copied that. So anyway, that book was really invaluable, and many of the little anecdotes that I can come up with that had been passed down through stories within the family. What else?
June, I don't know if you have a way of knowing this, and I don't know if I marked the page, but when Davies was confirmed, he was confirmed with his daughters, But it didn't mention his wife. Do you know anything about why she wasn't confirmed? Had she already been confirmed in another tradition or back somewhere else? Any ideas?
Right. You know, I wondered the very same thing, and I don't know. I don't know. I never read anything about her as far as previous. So, you know, the both of them had been in the Methodist Church in the community until St. David's was established. So it may be that she just wanted to remain a Methodist. I don't know. That'd be my best guess. She was from Waynesville. She's buried there. And thanks to a photo that John Slater unearthed, found the burial plot of her parents, and her and two of the Davies children are in the cemetery in Waynesville. That picture's in the book.
Saw that.
Anything else from that? I'm looking at my notes. I think there is a quote, the bishops quoted in the proceedings of the convention as saying that the western part of North Carolina was ripe for the Episcopal Church. And in spite of the fact that, and I go to great lengths to tell all the reasons why it wasn't right or why it wasn't embraced. And when I found that Horace Kephart quote, I about jumped up and down and squealed, you know. It was like, if you need any proof or even a tiny inkling, then that said it all, I think. But the other thing, and I brought this to the attention of Canon Augusta once when she was visiting us, kind of doubt it went anywhere, but I've noted there that the property was indentured to the diocese. Now that would have been the Diocese of North Carolina when our church was born, because there was no Diocese of Western North Carolina. And I asked the canon, I brought that up to her and asked her, would she know or perhaps be interested in looking into, does the Diocese of North Carolina still hold the indentureship, however you say that?
It seems to me that, when the Diocese Western Carolina was formed, maybe all of those were transferred in this area to the Diocese of Western North Carolina, would be my guess.
And they likely were. They likely were. But what that means is that property can never be used for anything else other than a church. So in the 40s, when another church wanted to buy our church and our property, they were told they could not because it had special, it was indentured and it wasn't for sale, couldn't be sold. So I found that pretty interesting.
So we're into chapter 3 now?
I believe we better move on here.
Chapter
words do have meaning, don't they?
They do, Paul. They certainly do.
Well, you mentioned chapter 3. I had not realized until I read chapter 3 the first time, and I remember how I was surprised how much cooperation there was between St. John's and St. David's in that period when St. David's was getting re-established. How helpful the people of St. John's were.
They were indeed, and all the new faculty that started coming into the community at the end of the World War II in the 40s, if they were Episcopalian, they went to church at St. John's. And so when St. David's was reopened, even initially, of course, it was neither a parish nor a mission. It was just a student center. And so even the students were were transported to St. John's in the evening for services. And then when, in 1962, when St. David's became a mission, then some of the people then transferred to St. David's, and some, like the Vom Lanes, did not. They stayed. And so it just depended on how it went.
Back to a little bit earlier time, I was interested that Ella Madison was an Episcopalian.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's another example. Robert never became an Episcopalian. He was a Methodist. He stayed Methodist. So, you know, I guess that could, I mean, that's happened certainly in the course of marriages and religious preferences over and over.
I love reading about Rufus Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Rufus was just, what can I say, a miracle, really. I like his, the quote there. Let's see, that would be in the next chapter 3, I guess.
But we've moved on to 3.
Where, I could look it up. I've got the page.
One on page 49, where he talks about first contact.
Right. Where he said when he took over this church in St. John's in Columbia, South Carolina, that they said his first job was to raise the money to pay for the building and the new organ. And he said, no, my first job is to raise the spirit. And
Yeah.
I thought that was so, it was just so indicative of him, certainly from the get-go. And, you know, that was our spirit when Michael came, was that we could, we didn't really have enough money then to pay a full-time priest, but we felt we could grow into it. And I think we're having that spirit again. We can.
Ditto today, yes.
Even today, even today in a pandemic, we can grow into a full-time parish. Maggie Bowles and Jim Bowles had to go to a funeral last year to that church in Columbia, St. John's, and she sent me a picture. There was a portrait of Rufus hanging in the hallway, and because of reading about him in the book, then she took note of that and photographed the painting and sent it, or I guess it was a photograph. She photographed the photograph of Rufus hanging in the hallway there and sent it to me.
Well, it was Rufus who saved all the furnishings and everything.
That's right. And some of our furnishings went to St. John's, but he kept a record. Rufus was an administrator as well as a spiritual person, and so he kept a record. And so when we reopened, he knew where everything was and he got it back.
It's amazing.
It is.
Allie, do you remember hiking with him?
I never did. I've always wanted to, but I never got there.
Well, I thought maybe Sally did.
Vividly hiking.
Right.
Yeah, because Dad, for every deanery meeting, he would pick Uncle Rufus up and take him, I guess, to Waynesville. And I guess from that relationship grew hiking and hiking and hiking. He was amazing.
Sally, do you know if your dad ever hiked Mount LeConte with Rufus?
Oh, we hiked Mount LeConte, oh gosh, with Uncle Rufus pretty much every spring. I don't think we did the fall because I think that's when Dad kind of did the Labor Day hike for the church. Anyway, I will always remember hiking up Trillium Gap. It was still in March. It was late March. and we hit what I call glaciers, but they were just major ice. And Uncle Rufus was blind, and he just, somehow he knew where all the moss was, and he got over it very quickly. But Tom Dillard was with us, and he went sliding down the mountain on his backpack. I don't know how many feet. I was terrified I would join him.
Sally, did you always go up Trillium, or did you have other routes as well?
We went up Trillium. We went up, well, normally, I think his favorite was going up Rainbow Falls and coming down Bullhead.
Okay.
Because Trillium, because Rainbow Falls has the most gorgeous spring flowers, the trout lilies, the trilliums. I should know more. I'm Mom's daughter, but
Yeah. No, that's great.
Words, oh heavens. Anyway, he tended to know where patches of the perennials were, and he would stop and say, okay, this is where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the folklore about him was that even after he became practically blind, way past being able to drive, that he would still point out the various patches of flowers and trees and the birds.
Oh yes, I can verify that.
Yeah. Oh,
Nope.
good. It was
Yeah.
really,
And he was very, very stubborn. He liked to be on time. Jay, well, all of us were teenagers, or Jay, I guess Ben was 2, 4, somewhere in there. And he expected to be heading down Bullhead at a certain time. And one time he went on ahead without anybody. And that was the day. Well, Bullhead is like a stream bed. It's full of rocks. And he tripped over a rock and cut his head. And Dr. Ralph Morgan had to come and pick him up and take him to the hospital. I'm not sure how we managed all the logistics.
right. Wow.
It was something.
Well, needless to say, he was a huge influence in many different ways for the church, and of course was the one who raised the money to get it reopened, do enough repairs to reopen the church as a student center. And there's a picture in the book, I believe, of what it looked like when it was first reopened. And that was all his doing. And he had actually officially retired when he did that. But he never quit. He never gave up. He never stopped.
The
picture is on 57.
Okay, thanks, Gracia.
He
That's on the
and his
bulletin.
wife did not live together for the last part of his life because, they were never divorced, and they met off, well, I don't know what often was, but I think his strong personality had a lot to do with it.
I see. Yes, he was on the move all the time, wasn't he? Yes.
And if my memory is serving me correctly, I think that there's a craft shop in Dillsboro. It seemed like I was in conversation with the owner there several years back, and I thought she said she was a granddaughter of Rufus Morgan, but I don't know her name.
Great nieces.
Yeah.
It might have been Susan.
You're talking about Susan Levier.
That may be. Anyway, it's a really nice craft shop.
Right.
And that collection there in Dillsboro.
Right.
And of course, I wanted to ask her, well, would she come on back to St. David's and help us build up the membership? But I didn't go there because I didn't know her, and that didn't seem very appropriate. But that was in my mind.
Right.
That's Ralph Morgan's daughter.
That's right. And Ralph, I'm right, Ralph and Rufus were brothers, right?
No, Ralph would have been, Lucy was his sister. Well, yeah, I guess they were.
Yeah.
I don't think so. There was a generation in between.
A generation in between. Okay, so Margot said that she was his great niece, Rufus's great niece. That would be.
So Ralph must have been the son of Rufus's brother.
Something like that. Ralph had a mission to, well, he was charismatic too, and he hired Mom 1969 to run the multiphasic screening clinic.
Right.
Yeah, and they called Miss Lucy Great Aunt Lucy. He could have called her that. Miss Lucy Morgan, who was Rufus's sister.
Right.
I think it's one of the things that I get out of this is how strongly identified from this era St. David's is with Western, and that it was then, and I hope it will continue to be a strong area of outreach for our parish. Galen, have you heard it all from the young woman that was appointed the missioner to the campus?
Well, it's funny you should ask. We just had our first meeting today, and she's very excited to be working with St. David's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She's coming over on Friday. Her wife is a graduate, an athletic graduate of Western, so her wife is coming to give her a tour of the campus, and I said to come and stop in St. David's. The church would be open, and she's interested in partnering with us and coming over and, you know, when things are ready to open up, get to know people and help us move forward and building a strong relationship with the students at Western.
Great.
Yeah, it was a good meeting. And she is interested to know if there are people in our parish who are interested in campus ministry. She would love to talk with people in the parish who are interested in that. So let me know.
Right. During our interim period, I think Judy Robinson made some efforts in that direction, but I'm not sure anything particularly concrete came of that. But I know she's one who is interested, especially.
Oh, that's wonderful. I will reach out to Judy and then put her in touch with Kelsey.
Yeah.
Now, Kelsey just started in July, and she's very excited to be in the diocese.
Good. I was interested, I just wanted to point out that in that chapter 4 about Bishop Henry, he was another remarkable ancestor of our efforts in the West, in the church. And he was really in charge. I mean, the warden was the senior warden, was called the warden, the bishop's warden, rather than senior warden. And he was, everything that happened at the church had to go through Bishop Henry. But he was a cheerleader and just did all he could to support that we had a priest, even though in the first 8 years we had 4 different ones, and sometimes shared with St. John's. but he worked to make that happen. However, it did happen. He also would come over and have preaching missions, like a revival. No COVID then to make that impossible, the way it happened down in Cashiers recently. But he was a really dedicated bishop, very spiritual person, and also somebody to get things done. So yeah, education. I mean, really, through all these chapters, these first chapters, there is a theme that the church, the Episcopal Church, was interested in education. Davies had gone to all kinds of lengths to educate himself, and he was interested. You know, I guess everybody knows, maybe not Galen, that Judge Davies was the chair of the Board of Trustees for the first Board of Trustees. Those 9 men were called the Noble Nine, and he was the chair of the board until 1922, I believe, from the time it was formed in the 80s.
Thomas Cox was one of those.
And Thomas Cox, his son-in-law, was also one of the original Noble Nine. So we have those kinds of roots in the university, and the way that has gone over time is up and down. But we've had certainly a lot of faculty of St. David's. Many members of St. David's have been faculty or staff at the university, as well as the student participation. So there was a Canterbury Club formed in 1955, but honestly, by the time John Rivers came in 1967, that club was no longer listed in the yearbook. So the turbulent 60s had already maybe taken hold and started changing attitudes of students. Anyway, a lot to explore there.
I believe it was the Tuttrups and Sossamans that kept it going in the late 50s, right?
Well, in the 60s, when Rufus got the money, because of course they went to St. John's initially when they first came here. But when Rufus got the $10,000 to refurbish the church and reopen it as a student center, it was those 2 families, the Tuttrups and the Sossamans, who came then to St. David's and were so instrumental in establishing it then and continuing with it as long as they were alive, literally. They were our foremothers and forefathers in the church. In the second go around, we'll say. What else? Any other last thoughts that you want to, or questions, or last thoughts, or your impression of the beginning?
Did Rufus Morgan found Penland?
His sister was the main one, but he helped her for about the first 4 years of Penland. He was very involved with it, and then he was called to South Carolina, to the various churches in South Carolina, and was no longer involved in Penland so much as he had been at the beginning. Anyway, I'm sure he stayed involved because it was his sister, but
Can I ask one more question? How different does the church look inside today than it did originally? Are there more doors?
Thank you for bringing that up.
Or what did it look like?
Yeah. Okay, so there's really, it looks the same, except where the door goes from the church building out on the deck was a window originally. And when the first addition or the first parish gathering place was built, it covered up the window where that door was a window, and it also covered the window next to it, going toward the altar. When we had the architect, when we were going to build the parish hall, and we were talking to him, he said to us, I bet that other window is still visible, or where it was is still visible. And so, of course, those of us and all of us involved in raising funds said, well, how much would that cost to have that window restored? And the architect's estimate was $10,000. And we said, well, too bad, we won't be able to do it. But parishioners in the church got wind of that and anonymously gave the $10,000 to restore that window. And so the next to the last window going east on the right was covered up by the parish, by the addition of the first parish hall, and then restored when we had the new parish hall. So, and you know, honestly, if you look at it, you can't tell the difference. I just think it's an amazing bit of craft work that somebody could come in there and redo it like that. But it did.
I wonder where the stove was.
The stove was in the back, is my understanding from other little snippets of things I read. The old pump organ was in the back, though we'll get to that in another chapter. When the Zimmer organ first came, it was up in the front on the right, and then later moved to the back. Carol, I think the other door that's in the church, the one that's on the back wall, was simply put there as just a way to get in and out more than so that you didn't have just one door. I find nothing, I never found that door reference in anything I read. And of course,
it might have to do with fire regulations too.
Yeah, there probably weren't many at the time the church was built, but I don't even know if the door was put in then, but I'm assuming that it was, and it was just simply made sense to have more than one door to get out.
The way the molding is around that door, I think it's been there since the church was finished inside.
Yeah, I do too. That's my feeling.
I'll ask
The
Felicia.
escape door, in case the sermon was really bad and the clergy had to get out.
A quick getaway.
Make sure to keep it unlocked for me. You know,
Galen,
Reach
yeah.
the latch, Galen.
I'll have to check on that.
I was interested in the communion vessels that we've been using, and up until when you and your family gave new communion vessels in Newt's memory, but that goes back to the Cox family giving that for the reconsecration.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One of those silver-bound flasks was broken, and so we no longer had a set.
Yeah.
And so we had the one with the silver rim, and nobody knows where the silver rim of the broken one, what happened to it. So when Newt died, and I asked the altar guild, I wanted to give something in his memory, and that's what was suggested. So I gave the new cruets at that time. Yeah.
That's happened to the audio.
Yeah.
Jen, I think one of the aspects of these first 4 chapters is the tremendous job that you did with coordinating the chronology. There's more bishops, there's more priests, there's more families in and out and back and forth, and shut down and open up, and you know, I don't know what kind of chart you had and lines connecting names and dates, but you did that very, very well.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
June, I know I know we may be going over time, but I do have one more question that probably relates to this time period. It may relate to another one, and that is, there's 2 chairs in the chancel area now, and then there's 2 chairs up here in the upper room as you head out to the deck that look like they would have also at some point been in the chancel area. Can you tell us something about the 4 chairs, why there's 2 in there now and 2 up here? And
Yes, I can, and anybody can jump in. Okay, the two that are in the church now were designed by Alicia Kirwan and given, Bill and Balin, help me, by her grandmother, Daisy Balin's mother. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Daisy wanted to make the gift, and Alicia designed the chairs, and they were built,
Over in Tennessee, by a company that makes church furniture.
Okay, so they were built in Tennessee. The original 2 chairs, I don't have any information on them other than that they were there as long as I've been around. And I don't know, Margot, do you know anything more about the first 2?
They were there when we first started coming. They
Yeah.
they didn't match, but
Yeah, they match.
both, and one of them is more primitive than the other, but they're older.
And they're beautiful. Valerie thought it was cluttered, and she wanted the older chairs removed, and that's why they're upstairs.
Yeah, let me, Galen, that's it. All 4 chairs were in the church until the interim thought that the church was too cluttered and had them moved. And so that when our daughter designed the chairs, and the priest, Michael, at that time felt that there was a need for those chairs in the church.
Right.
well, it would seem to me that if you had any acolytes, there would be nowhere for them to sit in the current arrangement. So that's why I was curious.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
So where were they?
They were just on the west side of the chancel step. So one was where the speaker is now, the speaker cabinet, and that was just moved down more toward the organ. And the other one was opposite on the other side.
That makes sense. Okay.
That's where they were. Yeah. Any other last minute thoughts?
I think this relates to the time when the chairs had a rail. One Sunday when we had a guest priest, I managed to put the segment of the removable segment of the rail in place before the guest priest had gotten himself behind it, and he thought that it was a lockout.
Yes, just so Galen knows, there is a piece of the altar rail to make it continuous. And Valerie didn't like that, and she had that taken out too. It's up under the eave and right off your office.
All right. Well, without opening too much of a Pandora's box, what is everybody's feeling about these chairs and the rail? Because are people happy with them gone?
I wasn't.
Whichever way. I mean, I think if they are needed, we should bring them back.
Yeah. I think the altar being open, I kind of like that part because it makes it all more together. And then it also was inviting to have people stand if they didn't feel like they could kneel for whatever reason, and, you know. So it was a good place to stand instead of kneel with it not there.
One of the part of the reasoning behind it was to make it all more accessible, which is what June's sort of addressing. And it would, by moving that amplifier case up the step and not having a chair there, people could stand out in front of the chancel step that did not feel they could go up that step. But then since then, we've put in a second handrail to facilitate people going up that one step.
Right.
It used to be we just had one step. And Alicia here was very helpful too. She pointed out how that was very nice for going up the step, but she stood and demonstrated how awkward it was to use that railing going down the step. So we put in the second handrail.
So
Couldn't
Galen,
get the same blacksmith, but they're similar.
right. The one on the right was the first one we had. That was a gift by a couple who are deceased. And then the one on the left was the new one that we put to help with the issue of people being able to go up and down the step.
And it was also a gift of a parishioner.
Yes.
Galen, you may know this. I hope I'm not saying, well, Bill, I know that, but the St. David's is very unusual in that all those pews, none of the pews are attached to the floor. In other words, you could move all of the pews. Theoretically, if you wanted to, you could move all the pews out of the church and have a medieval church with no pews and where everybody stood. So you can things can be rearranged in that church almost in any configuration you want, because the pews are not attached to the floor.
That was the case in my sending parish, and we had a special tool in the sacristy that the sexton would use to replace the pews, because we would always move them. In All Souls, we would, move them getting up and down from the kneelers, or
Right.
So they were constantly readjusting them to get them back so that people could still get in the pews.
And those spare pews that are in the gathering place have been moved into the church for big weddings like Alicia's and Courtney's. And we can crowd a bunch of people into that, more people into that space. It gets very hot and crowded though.
But it's important to hold on to those pews.
Yes.
Definitely, right. Margot, what's the name of the other, I don't know the correct name of the piece of furniture that Michael always used that was in front of one of the chairs. It's no longer there. It knelt on it.
A pray-do.
Pray-do.
Okay, right. So there's that also, and I don't know where that is.
There it is.
It's in Galen's office.
Oh, okay. Very good. All right. That was also in the.
And Galen, I'm sorry that I didn't introduce myself formally to you and my wife, Betty Lynn. We're so glad you're at St. David's. We would love to be in Cullowhee, but we're here in Chapel Hill. So
Well,
We missed you.
the beauty that we will be online for as long as I can imagine, you can continue to join us.
I'm sure they will, I hope.
They have been.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other burning issue, I guess we'll sign off. I appreciate your being here and I had fun.
yeah.
Thanks, this is great.
This
Yeah.
is great.
Thank you, June.
Thank you, June.
Okay.
Thanks, June. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Good to see
Okay, all right. Thank you, Carol, and everybody, Kelly, Steve, who helped set up.
Bye, Sally. We'll see
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye. Thank you for
Great to have
coming,
you,
Sally. Good to see you.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
That was interesting.